I'm Paula Kelly-Paul. I'm so excited to be here with you, and it's really been a fantastic opportunity to bring some of our star librarians to you and to share their stories. And today in particular, it's a lot of fun because we've got our ambassadors with us, our Raeco ambassadors. And of course, our inaugural ambassador is Karen Siegler, and we'll hear from Karen shortly in the show. But also our newly appointed ambassador from the Teacher Librarian world is none other than Sally Sutherland. Welcome, Sally! Woohoo! Fantastic. Freddie Mercury would have been proud of you, girl. I love it. I love it. Welcome, Sally. It's lovely to have you with us today. And Sally probably can't talk about yet what it's like to be an ambassador because it's. I think we're signing off on this today on the MOU from memory. But Sal, you have been a head teacher librarian and also, worked in a number of Victorian schools, and interestingly, also have had a lot to do with Raeco as a customer. So it'll be interesting to hear about your experience of that. But most importantly, let's just start with, Sally's story, because of course you're in this lovely phase of your life.
My new life.
Your new life. Tell us about Sally, the teacher librarian, post-teacher librarianship.
We're the lucky ones who were locked out in Victoria during COVID. So we were locked out at northern New South Wales, Southwest Rocks in our caravan with a lot of other people that we ended up making friends with. So we've had a lovely time each year since then, and we've spent our winter in the warmth.
How beautiful! And I've seen the view from the front of the caravan site, Sally and Pete have, and can I say it's a waterfront view?
It is,
it's pretty special.
We worked up to that because we're the only 13 caravans left at the campground.
When COVID was on,
yeah, so
wow.
Normally it's hard to get those positions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Sal, on that note too, I think you became a bit of an advocate and a writer while you were away that first time, didn't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I advocated for people to get back into Victoria. So there were many elderly couples who were stuck in New South Wales. They were on the pension. They were really struggling to pay the money at the caravan park.
Yeah.
So I ended up advocating for them and getting 2 lots back. Which is,
well done.
I believe only 3% of people who applied got in, so I did all right to get 2 lots.
Absolutely. A good return on the numbers on that, Sal.
We're friends with them now too, so it's nice.
Yeah, beautiful. There's the librarians at work in the community.
Yeah,
Once a librarian, always a librarian, I think.
It's a bit lucky to be literate, I think, and able to use technology, because the older people didn't have the technology to even apply.
Yes, wow, good point. And such an important part of what libraries do, isn't it, is bringing that skill development, the lifelong learning, and of course in the school environment, it is a little bit different, of course, to public librarianship, but there's lots of similarities. So would you talk to us a little bit about your experience as a teacher librarian and as a head of libraries in schools, and perhaps some of the roles that you've had in the schools that you've worked at, around what you think is the point of difference?
I was thinking about this in the way today. I think the point of difference is that you have the same community, and so you're able to get to know them very, very well. And you are serving the curriculum of the school. So you've got 2 sides like that, but very similarly, you're dealing with children. I've taught kids in the early learning centres or the creches right through from kindergarten to year 12.
Yes.
So I've taught in Jewish schools and schools with Aboriginals, Echuca and Warrnambool. I've even taught kindergarten in New South Wales. So I've had 18 schools, and Melbourne Girls College was my last position.
Permanent position, because of course you've done some backfilling at Genazzano, of course, after that.
At Genazzano, and that was an early learning centre for year 12 job. I think that the wonderful thing is that I realised that it had to be child-centred or student-centred. So everything that I did had a child leader or a person making decisions other than myself. And I got the girls on board at Melbourne Girls, and it was part of their leadership position to run book club, to to actually design and come in
co-design,
and play,
isn't it?
yes,
Yeah.
and play. So even at Glen Waverley, they had a great music program. I brought the musicians in to do their recitals and performance into the library at lunchtime.
I love that.
So all together, I spent my whole time thinking of how to include children to make decisions in the library, from choosing books or setting up clubs.
I love that. I was just actually speaking to Annie Devonish over at Camberwell Girls Grammar the other night, and of course they hosted the Yabba Awards there last week on Thursday, and it was just a fantastic event. And she was telling me how she partnered with the music department, and the seniors put together this song about the Yabba award-winning authors and illustrators, and they performed it at the event, and they had both the music they composed as well as the songs, and the authors and illustrators were just blown away by this wonderful, wonderful, highly professional, I might add, event that was put together under Annie's leadership as the head of that library there. So you can have quite a coordinating role. And in our previous conversation at the first show that we've been filming on Library on the Couch, we were talking about collaborative practice in public libraries in particular. But collaborative practice around schools is about working with the other teachers, isn't it, as well as the children?
Yes, it's with. So at Melbourne Girls, every year at the end of the year program, often they're just a waste of time, but instead we had authors come in with picture books. The girls all made a picture book of their own. They chose their own topic, and they then produced them and took them to the local primary school to read them and gave them to the children. So sometimes they went to interview the children to see what sort of book the child wanted, what style of writing, and then go and to finish it and to take it to read to them and give them the book.
Fantastic.
Yes,
I
things
love
like that were. So you can see it's community building.
Yes.
And it's really student centered, so that they learn lots of skills instead of me having my style. I think that was something, as I aged, I realised I had to put the young person in the place to make decisions about design, about what was going on our walls, about colour and shape and form. And I know that it's lovely to have a beautiful library. I learned that after being in some very ratty ones and even in a corridor for a half year. But the main thing, I think, is actually involving the children in that process too, if you can.
I love that. And it was interesting. We, again, in the previous conversation we were having on the program, we were talking about values and the values that Public Libraries Victoria hold, and how much, how important they are in terms of what you do. And it's interesting because one of our guests referred to the Raeco values as well, which we have an acronym which is TRIP. And I often say, if you don't follow the values, we're going to trip up as an organisation. And TRIP stands for T is transparency, R is respect, I is innovation, and P, which I have advocated that we add more P's on, so it's like TRIP, which is, things like participation. It's things like the product design, new product design, and being involved, having people participate in that. It's around passion. That we are, as librarians and people who serve in the librarian ecosystem, we are so passionate about making a difference. And I think that's where, particularly when you're working with young people, you see that, as you say, you see that relationship that you have building over such a layered piece when you've got them. Sometimes, as you said, at your schools, which are, if they're P to preps right through, or kindergarten even, K to 12, you have potentially having a relationship with these little people where you're seeing them a number of times a week for 13 years. And it can change their lives.
And I think you're exactly right that we have to help tailor the interests of those children and the curriculum and put it all together and make it sort of blossom and bring forth something that's wonderful, which can happen in libraries.
Absolutely. And I think, a lot of the things you're talking about are very common with public libraries, but that relationship in terms of the, if you like, the dosage is what's different, because you might often have, the kids in the library nearly every day
Yes.
in a school, but also, and that role that a library plays as safe place,
Yes.
place of connection and solace. Tell us perhaps some little stories about that, Sal, in your experience.
As a safe place, in Glen Waverley, I had lots of Aspie, particularly boys, but a few girls. So we set up a chess master and had them each lunch. And after a little while, the kids warmed to the idea of being a group and asked, could I set up an Aspie's group?
Oh, I love it.
And that was many years ago now.
Well before it was a sort of
probably.
a thing, as you know, it's much more sort of inclusive, and we're now, I think, focusing as a society on more inclusion and diversity. But back when you're at Glen Waverley, that would have been a bit out of the box, I imagine.
It was, and it took me by surprise.
Yeah.
But it really worked for those kids, and they became monitors as well, which gave them a lot of confidence.
Leadership development.
Right.
I love that.
And then at Melbourne Girls, I had a lot of girls that I found that realised later were gay, but I didn't really know. Maybe they didn't know. But sometimes girls with disabilities came and spent their time in the library too. But they became strong book club members.
Yes.
We had monitors program. I had a young girl from Clifton Hill, Ohio, I think, and she came to our school. She was distraught, and so I did listen to her, and I put her in the back room and let her have lunch quietly with us, and gradually she worked her way toward being a monitor. But I could ask her, you know, what's making you so sad? And she said, oh, I really hate the toilets. And so I was able to go and see Judy, the principal, and say this, and she got the toilets all upgraded.
Wow.
But it was interesting that she'd been at Wesley, that's right, and she got really upset by the standard of our toilets. It wasn't the teaching.
She'd had the high end. Let's just, you know,
but the lower was often
pretty low.
Anyway, things like that you can listen and feed back to the administration, and it changes everyone's lives.
You know, I was just reading a paper by a Year 12 student that was actually about the power of picture books in talking about grief and loss for young people. And it was a beautiful paper. So it was a Year 12 assignment, and honestly, it blew me away. I was in tears reading it last night. It was extraordinary. And what the student was saying, and who happened to have lost her mum, so lived experience. So, you know, I knew that as a background piece when it wasn't in the paper, but I knew this about this student. Anyway, she was talking about the power of picture books to allow children to face difficult topics like grief, like loss, and to not normalise it in the sense of saying, well, that's everyone's experience. It's not. But to normalise the conversation about difficult topics and difficult things that are hard for kids. And would you talk about that a little bit, about what's happened in your professional life or personal life around that?
I say that menstruation has been a taboo, and I only realised this. I thought it was all over. The ads were on telly for tampons and pads, and everyone seemed very cool. And I wrote my own little story while the girls were writing their picture books. I wrote my own picture book.
Because they had that picture book assignment.
Yes, that's right. And they were sitting with me in the library, and they were my English class. So I wrote my own book, and I read it out to them at the end. And it just talked about my first experience having my period, and that my mum had put some pads in the bottom of my school bag. And the day came, and I knew I wasn't going to die, and I wasn't going to bleed to death, and that I knew what to do. And the girls were so embarrassed and so upset by what I wrote. I got them to respond to it, and most of them said, I don't want to have my period. I don't care what's happening out of my VJJ. I just don't want to have this experience, and I'm not going, and I don't want to have it. And then I realised that we hadn't got anywhere all these years.
It was still a taboo.
It's still a taboo.
Yes.
And then I have been working with Dates for Girls and other programs. I've been to the Solomons and realised that taboo is all around the world, as well as Australia.
Yes.
And so I started to write a book for my own sons who are older. And
your grandsons too.
And my grandsons,
yes. Yeah.
But I was thinking of my own children at the time, and I wanted it picture book so that they read it when they were very young, that they could read it themselves. And it was a book just like something like Guinness Book of Records, very snippety, not too much writing, lots of fun in it. So I had a Where's Wally type of thing where they had to find the person along the way.
So a bit like Ripley's Believe It or Not kind of, combination of all these fun type non-fiction
and way
formats.
out facts about what we call periods. And I really felt that if boys got to see about periods and felt it was normal, human, and healthy woman. If you're a healthy woman, you have a period.
Yes.
I felt if that was normalised, then a lot of the problems we're having with periods and older girls, it would not be an issue.
Yes.
Be like, I wanted it like, where did I come from and what's happening to me?
Which is such a seminal book, wasn't it, as a picture book for little people to have the conversation about where did that baby come from?
It was the first time we were told the truth.
Well, before that was the
then,
store.
My father told me that he gave my mum his seed.
Okay. Cabbage seed or, whatever.
Oh, whatever seed he had. Probably hay seed on our farm.
Yeah, I love it.
So, I felt like we needed the truth and we needed to know that it's healthy and good.
I was at dinner the other night with my son, George, and at his share house that he's been staying at with some friends. And these beautiful young people, they're in their mid-30s, young people to me, they're just gorgeous. And one of the fellows who lives there said, my girlfriend's here too, can she join us for dinner? Because I'd taken this beautiful 3-course meal over to share with them. Anyway, when his girlfriend came out, he said, Emily's got a period, so she's not feeling well. And I said, sweetheart, are you all right? She said, yeah, I'm just not great. And he said, yeah, we're just going slow. And I just thought it was so natural the way he said it. It was like, Emily's got a cold and we're just making sure that she's okay, So I loved it. And it was the first time I've ever in my entire life, I'm 58 years old, I have never heard a man, or a person, let's say a person even, because it's not just about men. No. I'd never heard a person say in the company of others, and I was a perfect stranger in that room other than to my son and his best friend. The others were strangers to me, so I was a stranger to them in a sense. I mean, I was the mother of their very trusted friend, so not quite a stranger. But I'd never seen that before, and I thought, wow, that level of just inclusion and normality. And then it came out in the discussion, I just love this, that his mother's a children's librarian and that he had exposure to lots of different books about difficult topics. So it wasn't about that topic in particular, because we've discovered there is not such a thing. So, we're still, championing Sally. So if there's any publishers out there watching or partners who want to work on this book, the text is all done. It's had co-design from the kids. And, we're going to get this book published, I'm sure of it. And I love the name that Sally's put on as a sort of working title. Sal, tell us what it is. Or what's the latest?
Many.
Yeah, what's the latest?
Tell me that.
Well, I thought it was period, full stop.
Yes.
So that was kind of fun.
No, it's had lots, but period.
Ride the wild pony at some stage or something.
Yeah. Surf the Crimson Wave.
That's it.
But I think period dot is a good one.
Yeah, I think it is too. And it's got that sort of pragmatism to it as well.
Yeah.
So we are hoping to get when I say we, the royal we, I've already kind of said to Sal, we're on board with you with this project. It will be a great project to bring to life, but we'll get it published, and I think it'll be a really valuable piece. But look, coming back to ambassadorial role now, completely kind of coming full circle around Raeco, I'd really love to hear a bit about your experience as working with Raeco, but also in designing your library spaces, because I know that you've been involved in so many library refurbs too. So.
Yes, well, the new refurb was Glen Waverley Secondary College, and I knew that I could never have got the result that we got without Raeco, and I had a lot of pressure on me to not use anything professional, to go with grey laminate ends that the workshop at the school would make for me, and I really stood up for this and said, no, this is how it has to look, and I made a page to show what it would look like. And the principal agreed finally, and afterward he was just thrilled.
Yeah.
And he had this beautiful library, and we had purpose-built displays, front-end displays,
Yes.
things that were, this was all new.
Yeah, because that's a while ago now, wasn't it? So it was really, yeah, it was again an out-of-the-box kind of approach, wasn't it?
It was,
to
and the
face out
quality
display.
was fantastic, and their advice on placement was really good, and we designed the whole space, which was quite a difficult space. It wasn't an easy space.
Yes.
And we designed it and it worked.
How fantastic. Was that our beautiful Lisa who worked with you on that?
Yeah, I think
yeah.
so. It was a long time.
Well, Lisa's been around for that amount of time, so it would have been Lisa. She's our wonderful Victorian, one of our Victorian area managers in southern New South Wales. And she's, you know, I hear that all the time, and I worked a lot
we had
with
even had a foyer that was meant to just be, I don't know, put your shoes there. I don't know what you're meant to do with it. We made a whole extra area for reading.
Love it.
And all soft chairs. This is in the days, we had 2 lots of soft chairs. This was very extravagant.
Yeah,
And
fantastic.
we did it in the school colours, which were blue and red and the grey floor.
Yeah,
And
fantastic.
that was interesting too.
Yeah.
But I think without Raeco, the product, what we would have had would have been very disappointing. And I go around a lot of libraries now and just look, school libraries, and find that sometimes they aren't nice places to be. And they're not comfortable, and they're not, it's something that is no excitement.
And they do need to be welcoming. And I was really relating to your story earlier about having it as a safe space, a welcoming space, no matter where people are, you know, your students are coming from. And to be honest, that's a very personal story for me too, Sal. You know, when I was a kid who went to 14 different schools and lived with 20 different families, and my introduction to libraries, you know, we were not a book family. My mum's a musician, so I think I probably got my words from her being a musician, because there was always a lot of music when she was around. There was a lot of music all around us and songs. But coming back to my experience, my first real library experience that I remember was when I was in year 9, and I was at one particular school that I'd been there for a longer period of time than the other schools. And Ross Steinwaddell, I still remember his name, was the teacher librarian at Southport High School. And I was not a reader. I used to write book reviews on going to see the movie. I did not read the books. Probably I got blessed with, you know, some brains in my head so I could get away with it. I'm not advocating for that, mind you. I'm just saying that's what I did to get through. But Ross would keep the teen magazines for me. Remember back in the day, the only teen magazines were sort of the American, I think it was just called Teen or something like that. I can't remember now. But, you know, it was the lip gloss and the you know, the latest thing in T-shirts and all that stuff. And he used to keep them for me. So I'd come into the library at lunchtime because I wasn't the cool kid and I wasn't the nerdy kid. I was somewhere in between. So I didn't want to go and smoke in the toilets or eat my lunch in the toilets, is even worse. Some of the kids did back then. Oh. And I wasn't nerdy enough to be in the really bright kid kind of cohort. So I was sort of in between. And because I wasn't a kid who was ever at any school very long, I was always a little bit, you know, not quite on the outer, because my extroverted personality allowed me to kind of get in pretty quick with someone. But I would spend a lot of time in the libraries at lunchtime, particularly around that time, at a time when I was in a youth emergency home. Going to the library at lunchtime was like this little haven for me, and Ross would have this little pile of magazines for me, and I'd sit down and read them. And for me, it normalised my life as a teenage girl to just read about other teenage girls. You know, it was sort of like I could pretend that I was sort of normal too, you know, even though my life was definitely not, you know, I don't know what you call normal anymore, but you know what I mean, don't you? You know, it was certainly a precarious childhood, but it made me feel like I could be one of those girls one day, you know, that I'd be all right. And that was a really powerful experience for me. And Ross also was the person who recommended me in the next year for a Rotary scholarship. So it was the teacher librarian who did that, and we've talked about this before, that made such a huge impact on me, because I was given a book bursary by the Southport Rotary Club. And I was in year 10, and I still remember that moment when it dawned on me that if I was being presented with this, I think they gave me a pile of books, school books. And I thought, if I'm being presented with this, and that was like a big deal to me to be given this must be important. This school thing must be important. So it was the first moment that I really connected with school was actually important, and it was worth me kind of making an effort, despite all the precariousness around my life, that it was worth making an effort for. And I started to think about what I wanted to do when I finished school, and started to think about that I wanted to finish year 12. So I was the first in family to finish year 12 and first to go to university, and certainly the first out of the youth emergency home cohort who went to university. And I do think about Ross a lot about that, that teacher librarian provided me with that handout, that safe place. There was no pressure. It was just, there was a chair there for me. There was the magazines. No expectations. It was really special.
I've reached out for girls to agencies in order to get enough money for them to do a program at the school, when you have to pay levies. I've done that quite. Smith family have helped me get girls, especially when they've had to pay for TAFE courses now at the that are as well as their VCE.
Yes. Yep.
So there's lots of times when I've reached out to other people to help kids in the library.
So it's a really, we talked about libraries, as in public libraries, being a place of community strengthening and also collaboration. And I think, this is one of the things I really want to highlight was the similarities between public libraries and schools. Of course, there are differences around curriculum, and we'll come and talk about that in a moment. But it's this lovely idea and opportunity that we have in the teacher librarian space. And I can say we, because I have had experience as teacher librarian briefly. And in fact, that's where Sally and I met. I was doing my Masters of Teacher Librarianship, and I did my placement at Melbourne Girls College in the library with Sally. So that's where we met and connected, and then we started writing articles together for journals and all sorts of stuff. It was a lot of fun, wasn't it? So coming back to school librarianship and the particular nuance of that, Sal. Talk to us a bit more about that, because some of our listeners might be working in a public library, or they might be studying and not got a job yet. They might be thinking that they'll go into public libraries, might not know much about school libraries, or school librarians thinking about going into the public library sector, which is kind of what I did as an educator. I was an educator, went into school libraries, and then I went in, educator, community development, school libraries, then public libraries. So for me, public libraries, I felt, were my home. But the educator in me has always stayed there, of course, as well. But for you, tell us a bit about the school library.
Well, as a librarian and a teacher librarian, you have to attend all the meetings, including curriculum, and follow the VEL standards. So that is very...
Well, it's the teacher part of teacher librarianship, isn't it?
That's right. And there are VEL standards for libraries.
That's the Victorian Education Learning Standards. Yes, just for our listeners who may not know that.
Every state has them. But that really is helpful too, because it shows you where you should go with your library. You don't have to make it up on your own, because you can. A big job is finding class set text for English, and I made that an important job, because if you can get a text that all the kids like, they already halfway there.
Yes, because they want to read it, don't they? Yes.
So books like, you might remember Mal's Last Dance, Chinese Cinderella. They were all on. I found them along the way, and the little boy who was brought up in Tasmania, who got lost in India and was, I can't think.
Was that Lion?
But it was called something else as a book. Well, we put all those books on the curriculum, and of course the girls lapped them up.
Yes.
All the children did, boys and girls. By me reading a lot and understanding that children like to hear about others' plights, it did help to find a book that. It's so hard to find one that every child likes.
But that's true, absolutely. It's one of the real challenges of having a book that every child has to read, isn't it? That's probably one of the bones of contentions I do have about
they don't have
school and reading.
Today.
I think it kind of turns them off reading it to some degree, doesn't it? But coming back to that, really, really wonderful experience around reading those books and recommending them and seeing the kids' reactions to those books. I bet that was rewarding too.
It's great, and then you write the curriculum with the teachers as well.
Yeah, beautiful.
So whatever you do with that book, whether you turn it into a play or a musical like you did, or just have some reviews in the library so that other kids can pick them up and read that same book.
It's a real collaboration, isn't it?
It is. And then I think you're right. A lot of schools, and I will say Genazzano did this very well. They had a great reading program. Well, they would have a lot of interaction with the children, and they'd be working in book groups. They'd work together and choose a book between 5 or 6, and they present at the end. There were a lot of formal things that came out of it, but they got a lot more choice. And I was thinking, you're right, choice is the key to all of this for in schools, and I'm sure in the public library system. Giving people an opportunity to make their own choices makes a lot of difference.
And this is where I think, coming back to your library design, collection arrangement and display and face-out display has such a big impact on that, Sal, doesn't it? When you've got children choosing what they're going to read or what they're interested in, if they can see it, a reluctant reader is more likely to pick it up.
Well, at my Lockington Primary, I realised that all the books on how to is what the little boys from the farms, that's what they wanted to read. So I put them in the picture book collection instead of in the fiction collection because they're only little children like 8 or 10 or even younger, preppies. And I put a little sticker on all the picture books and put them all together. And so they had how things work and all that, and all the simple books that were coming out, they were all new coming out on how things work.
I'm going to call that child-centred collection development. Because it really is about...
Otherwise they couldn't find it because it was in non-fiction.
Exactly, absolutely.
And
particularly back then, because all the non-fiction would have been in due order.
And way over there, that's right.
Yeah.
And so they couldn't have, and also those books were all spread out because they weren't on the same topic. So they never would have found these gorgeous books.
Yes.
So that was a great learning thing for me.
Fantastic.
And then I had real things. If they were interested in how things work, I bought in everything that was old that needed that was wrecked, like a hairdryer or an old photocopier, and I got screwdrivers and got them to pull them all apart and then work out all the pieces and say what each piece was.
Fantastic.
And stick them on paper.
Bit of cataloguing going on right there.
Yeah, and the children, the boys from farms right on board.
Beautiful.
So
I love it.
that kept, forever I realised that you could do that for any group.
Yes.
You just have to know what they like.
And it does enable you to help every child in your school understand there's something for them in the library when we go beyond, and we know the books are still always going to be core. It's the thing that sets a library apart from any other school building, but any other community building as well. The collection is the core to that. But it's about how do you connect people into accessing that collection.
Yes, and of course, if the boys were asked to identify all the pieces out of this machine, then they could also then look up the books that had all this in it and put it. Today it is difficult with technology because a lot of that's hidden. It's hard for people to connect up, I think, and that's why libraries need to be multifunctional in that they need maker spaces, jigsaws out, evidence that there's people there, like that children do the reviews, not the adults, have it displayed for everybody. I think it is getting more and more difficult to, so the more activities you have that children accidentally find books, the better.
And we'll introduce them to those collection items, absolutely. And Sal, in terms of going forward, and as I said, it's first day, welcome again, our new ambassador. And Sal, for you, I guess the question now becomes, how do you think this role might play out for you as being a Raeco ambassador?
Well, I think I can highlight to everybody the real importance of having quality libraries, and not just the books, but how
the staff too.
The staff, the books, and anything else that makes that library a community space. Yes, so that you can have your maker space, you can have a Lego table, you can have the things that you sell, but put them together in a room that everyone wants to be in.
Yeah, I love
And
that.
unless you see it as a whole like that, and where the children are involved in that decision,
Yes.
I was looking at the catalogue before and going, well, that chair, you can't just push it along easily and move it to another spot. And that's the sort of thing I learned,
Yes.
is that people want to move the furniture.
Yes.
They want to change the shape. Kids adore setting up the library how they want.
So we're expecting a little bit of new product development advice, I think, fellas over there who are doing the filming today.
Well, they
Adam
told me that at the time, Raeco
Yeah.
told me, if you want to be able to move this, and kids would need. If you don't want to be able to move it and you want it to stay exactly still, well, this is the other option.
Yeah.
And sometimes that drives librarians crazy.
Yes. But it's the reality. The reality is, my experience in public libraries was our people would come in the library and move the furniture.
Yeah.
So, it's what's going to happen, and kids are always going to move the furniture unless
so
they're
you
really,
make it good.
you've got to make
easy
it
to do it.
movable, absolutely,
Yeah.
mobile. And of course, now we've got spaces where you mentioned programming before, and that's become such an important part of public library activity too, is that sort of curated programming. So we're bringing people into the libraries, bringing students into the libraries, often with some other kind of carrot, if you like, but that then segues into, here's the relationship to the collection, as you just indicated before. And I think that in itself gives you a different perspective of how, as you say, the whole space worked. And I was really mindful when you said earlier about advocating for the budget and the whole makeover of Waverley Library, and how you did that you drew a picture, you gave a sort of concept to the principal.
Actually, we presented with Raeco as well.
Oh,
I
beautiful.
made these.
I love it.
What do designers call them? A page that you've got how you'd like it to look.
Yes,
but I think I brought that lady in as well to the meeting.
And probably back then it would have been a hand sketched one, was it?
Oh, everything was.
Yeah, of course. So of course now, now we have. I mean, this is you mentioned the risk of technology, but technology can also be harnessed for good, as we know. And we've certainly done that at Raeco with our Rex software. So Rex is the Raeco experience, and it's fantastic, Sal. I don't know if you've had a chance to see it yet, but what you can do is you could log in your floor plan, and you can click and drag bits from our catalogue, so you're actually seeing the live or the actual furniture that you might be using, and put it into the floor plan. And you can then, once you're sort of happy with the traffic movement and so on, and how it looks and what your zones are, you can then press a button and it's like magic. It goes whoop, and makes it into 3D. And one of the things that I've loved the most when I've seen schools and public libraries use this capability is to actually add in some co-design elements. So present a plan that is kind of indicatively a bit covers all the boxes, ticks all the things. So you've got to have a certain amount of shelving for the collection. You've got to have this zone and that zone and that zone. But then at that point, to involve the staff and or students and or your potential library users, to then go, you know what, I don't really like the look of that chair. I think we should have one with arms on for this reason, or we'd like to have a higher table there. And you can actually live bring those elements of the catalogue in and out and change it on the go. And it's a really, really rich and wonderful co-design experience for those people, that we know have used that facility. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, and
great
it is
stuff.
Community building, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Involve everyone in the design.
And whether it's your community of educators at the sort of teacher level, or your community of students, or your community members from your broader, local area that public libraries are serving. Very interesting stuff, Sal. So I guess, going ahead, we're going
one more thing.
Yes, yeah.
We know a lot more about the brain now, and we know about ADHD, we know about Asperger's or autism. Up until now, I think we had a lot of those children in our libraries.
Yes.
And I think now we can accommodate them better and have materials suitable for them. I know one little boy he's learning to code, and he's only 8, and he is making games now.
Yes.
And I think if you have a library like that, then you can accommodate those children
Absolutely.
that we couldn't before, or we didn't do it as well.
Well, we didn't celebrate it.
No.
I think that was
that's
it.
true.
So I think
We
the
were just
change is
putting
now.
up with it, weren't we?
Correct. We were just putting up with it
Yeah.
and making do and trying to contain the naughty boys. And I
Yeah.
don't mean that as a sexist comment. It's
No.
that, as we know,
No.
boys, it presents differently with boys than it does with girls, because for some reason us girls apparently, even if we have ADHD behaviours, we socialise the behaviours out of our normal way of being, or our usual way of being, I should say, because we want to behave and want to be good, whereas I think, that was less of a driver for little boys sometimes, not making statements, just saying this is my experience, and I think that's a really interesting comment.
My experience was that I realised they were the children I'd been dealing with a great deal,
Yes.
but I had an awareness that there was something different, but I didn't know how to help them the most.
Yes.
But you did by the things like chess club, like setting up monitor programs, like getting them talking and getting them feeling confident to do something technical, especially like use the library computers in days when we didn't have access to stuff like that. Anyway, that's a new part of the library.
It's not brand new, but it's certainly becoming more usual, isn't it, now? And that's a wonderful thing. I remember one of my gurus, Professor Stephen Heppel, who I just adore and is a wonderful senior educator, particularly in the UK, but he's an international sort of superstar in the space of creative technologies and learning, creating really engaging learning experiences for young people. And he was the guy who started the idea of coding in primary schools, 30, 40 years ago, and was seen as a bit of a left field, to say the least. That's a very mild assessment, because he was introducing coding at such a young age for these kids. And I think that has given us such a wonderful measure of the way forward. We've looked at how can we engage people who might be thinking a bit differently, and I think those creative technology spaces are certainly providing some of that. Not only that, this is about the skills we need to live in the world that we live in now. All of us have mobile phones, couldn't live without our computers, most of us now. That's just the way of life, and certainly we're all adapting to and having to address the issues of AI and the impact that's going to have on our world. This is incredible, and I think librarians have a really, really powerful and interesting role in this discussion
and
too.
Even politically lately, you wonder if people really know the source of the information they were getting on the Yes and No campaign.
Oh, yes.
And therefore, what we were trying to do 20 years ago or more is give people the ability to know where their information was coming from and the quality of that information. I feel like we haven't done as well as we could have on that.
Well, I think knowledge has exponentially grown, like the access to media, the access to information, whether it's true, false, fake, or has the fidelity attached to significant academic research. Well, you wouldn't necessarily know that unless you learn how to decipher that. And again, this is the librarian's role, I think, in schools.
And so the AI will be the next big
Absolutely
issue that we're going to have to
Well,
work on.
it's not just next; it's here now.
Yeah,
it's
my
with
boys
us
are using
right
it
now.
at work now.
Yeah. And look, it's a lot of fun, and it's a great tool. Again, if we learn to harness this tool for good, I think AI is going to actually be a wonderful contribution around productivity and around creativity, actually, and to foster people who couldn't organise their thoughts into a narrative can use the chatbots, ChatGPT and so on, to organise their thoughts and then still have the creative experience of adding to that. So, all of these things are the sorts of things that libraries provide the initial safe, and this is what Stephen Heppel used to say, the professor, was that they provide a safe place for people to try out new technologies where there's not a lot of risk involved. You're not being paid anything to go in there, so it doesn't matter if you stuff it up. You can take your time. You don't need to be an expert in any of it. It's okay to ask the dumb questions or to not know, and I think that's one of the great things.
And this is where your design of your library, you need collaborative spaces with hubs and sometimes some quieter spots, and that's something Raeco can show in their design.
Absolutely.
Because people
based in America. We interviewed him earlier this year on one of our webinars. He would agree that he talks about the library as being the sort of design platform, if you like, that actually creates the best way of sort of ongoingly moving with the design of how the students might use spaces. And they actually have developed an app that you can have the students, coming back to co-design again, can measure what's happening in those spaces. So they run around with their phones and check what's happening here or what's happening there. Is the space being used the way it was intended? And then help librarians to adapt those spaces to better use as they're going along as well, which sort of brings me, to sort of the final kind of point I want to raise with you, Sally, and that is around refurbishments. So, it's one thing to do a new library, and I really love the fact that you've cited a number of your beautiful libraries that you've been involved in, and I know with Genazzano, of course, Susan Lamarca's worked there before you, held that library space in really good stead.
She did.
She's got a wonderful understanding of that way in which to translate. Yes, and I was going to say translate programs and the collections in absolute tandem with each other. So refurbs, tell me about perhaps your experience of when you haven't got enough money to do the whole shebang. Have you been able to tweak some spaces along the way in some of your libraries to just, when you've got a little bit of a budget, you want to do something extra? What are the sorts of things you've done? And if you did it all over again, if you were in one of those libraries again now, knowing what you know now and knowing what you know of Raeco, what would you do if you could?
Well, in some of those poorer schools, there was no opportunity to have money from Raeco that would meet Raeco. But I think simplifying everything, this is a bit going back in the past because we didn't have computers to make nice banners and that sort of thing. And I think there was a lot of homemade junk all everywhere. And so by cleaning it out and simplifying the whole space, I think that was my first way of getting rid of all the past like that. So I don't know how you go. I saw a library in the peninsula recently which looked terrible, and I really could see that the children wouldn't want to stay there. It just had a collection. It was just sort of like you walked in one end and walked out the other. There was nowhere for them to sit and enjoy.
Wow.
It was really backward, and I thought this is
sad, isn't it? When you walk into a library like that, when we know what they can be, you do get rather sort of down about it when you walk into a library, when you think, oh my God, and of course we understand, not everyone's got access to the money or the resources, Yes.
And also I think technology has drained libraries, and we need to turn that around because we're not talking about no technology, we're talking about a place to use it to collaboratively.
Yes.
And we're talking about creating an atmosphere that children are really excited to be in.
And it shouldn't be at the cost of what the core
it should
business
be the
of the
integration
library
of the technology into that space.
Yes.
And we've made a mistake by taking it and making it so individual because we need to work together to learn.
Absolutely.
So higher learning only comes from, I think, working together.
Absolutely.
Teachers do.
Yeah, they do, as librarians do. I think it's part of our DNA is that sort of collaborative practice. So, Sal, we look forward to lots of more conversations with you. And of course, as an ambassador, Sally will be attending, conferences and so on. So please come and say hello to her when you see her at the SLAV conference in particular. I think coming up, Sal. I think we've yet to confirm all of that, but certainly Sal will be there, and we're looking forward to that input that you're going to have in our product design as well, because I know you've got lots of ideas in that regard too, based on your real lived experience as a teacher librarian. So, Sal, thank you for your time today. It's so lovely to have you with us.
It was a privilege. I didn't think I had anything left to say.
Look at
I
you.
obviously do.
Absolutely, because I'm having to wind us up because we've certainly had a great conversation.
Well, where you at?
And we could go on some more, but we look forward to hearing down the track again from Sal when she's had some time as an ambassador, and perhaps comment a little bit more about what that experience has been like and what some of you have been telling us about what you want in your libraries and what are the problems that you're trying to solve that maybe we can collectively help solve with you. So thanks for being with us again. Lovely to have you with us with Librarians on the Couch. I'm Paula Kelly-Paul, And it's been a delight. I look forward to joining you again. Please subscribe because you'll get the next exciting edition of Librarians on the Couch. Sally, thank you so much.
Of it.
Yeah, that's it. Well done. Thanks, Sal. Lovely to have you with us. Good stuff. You're welcome.
Bye.